Hello, and welcome to the UiPath Orchestrator licensing demo. At this point, we're assuming that the UiPath software has already been installed and the licenses have been delivered. What are the next steps? Well, first, the UiPath license needs to be activated and then uploaded to Orchestrator. You may also find the step-by-step instructions on how to do this on the dedicated page available in our online Orchestrator guide. The link to this page is provided in the Learning Resources section of our training. So, the first step that you need to perform in order to activate your license is to open Windows on your machine. Search for Command Prompt, right-click it, and select Run as Administrator. Now, what we need to do is to run the Change Directory command to set the UiPath Studio installation folder. Let's search for it on this machine. Go to Program Files. Open UiPath, select Studio, and finally double-click the UiPath folder. Now, we need to copy the location and paste it into Command Prompt. And the first step is done. Next, we'll use a regutil command to activate the license file. And we can simply copy and paste it in Command Prompt and then adjust it with the proper information. Type your email address here and then enter the license code. Now that we've done that, we can check whether the license is active or not by running the command mentioned in the next step. Same as before, we can simply copy-paste it. We can see that this command displays all the information related to this license, starting with the license code. The status of the license is 1, which means that it is or was activated. The next one is the device ID associated with this activation, and then the expiry date, and the number of robots of each type. There are 5 unattended robots, a non-production one, 2 named User Studio Development licenses, and 3 concurrent unattended users. So, the license is active, and this step is now complete. Moving on, we'll save all this information as a text file using this command. Now, let's select the directory to which the file is saved. We can also change the name of the file in order to recognize it easily later on. We can call it Orchestrator License. The file was successfully generated. We can now proceed by uploading the license to Orchestrator. Now, there are 2 possible licensing scenarios if you're planning to make use of the multi-tenancy feature. The first option is to upload the license at host level. This means that all the tenants are managed by a host admin, and there is a single license key for all of them. The second option is licensing at tenant level, meaning that each tenant is licensed individually using a unique license key. In our next demos, we'll take a look at how to upload licenses to Orchestrator in each particular case. Hello! In the previous tutorial, we generated our license file. Now, it's time to use that file and see how the host licensing works. Let's begin. We'll start by logging in using the credentials provided in the UiPath installation guide. For tenant, we need to insert host, the username is admin, and now the password in the installation guide. And we are being prompted to change the password, so let's pick a new one. Okay, now that we've accessed the host, let's navigate to the license page. As you can see, this instance is unlicensed at the moment. We can fix that by clicking the Upload button and then selecting the license file that was previously generated. We can now see the last digits of the license key, the expiry date, and the number of available robots of each type. 3 attended concurrent, 5 unattended, 2 development, and a non-production one. Now let's go back to the tenants page. Before proceeding, let's refresh our memory on the multi-tenancy feature. Multi-tenancy enables us to isolate the data generated within a single Orchestrator instance. This feature facilitates automating different company departments while ensuring the desired data access authorization per department. However, please note that all the data is stored in the same database. Moving on, we can see that multiple unlicensed tenants are listed here. We'll create a new one to see how the entire process is performed. We'll name this tenant Orchestrator 321. Let's enter the name, the surname, the email address, and a password. After confirming the password, we can click Provision. Our newly created tenant is now displayed on the list, but it is unlicensed. To fix that, we'll click the Allocate Licenses button. The number of available robots is displayed once again, and we can set how many of them we want to provide to this tenant. We'll go with 2 attended users and 3 unattended runtimes. We're ready to save our changes by clicking Allocate. We can see that the license status has been updated. If we return to the License tab, we can see that the graphs also show the updated information. 2 out of 3 attended concurrent and 3 out of 5 unattended robot licenses have been used. What about the remaining licenses? Well, we'll allocate those ones too. So let's go back to the tenants page. The Orchestrator 123 tenant is unlicensed, so it's a good candidate. We'll distribute 1 attended concurrent license and 2 unattended runtime ones. This way, multiple tenants can share a single license key, but we still haven't assigned all the licenses yet. So let's pick the default tenant and click Allocate Licenses again. We will distribute the remainder, 2 development licenses and a non-production one. Back to the License tab, we can see that all of them have been used. Next, we'll log in to the tenants that we created together to see the licenses that we've allocated. We must provide the credentials again. And, same as before, we are prompted to change the password, since this is the first time that we're logging in to this tenant. We'll enter the current password and the new one. Click Change Password, and we have accessed this tenant. Let's open the License tab to see the status. As you might have noticed, the host license status and the expiry date are displayed. Okay, that was all for host licensing. In the next video, we'll see how tenant licensing works. Hello! Now that we know how host licensing works, we can proceed to having a look at the individual tenant licensing procedure. Right now, we are on the Orchestrator login page. If our option is tenant licensing, we can proceed by accessing the predefined default tenant, whose credentials were delivered along with the license keys and installation instructions. After the first login, we need to change the password to protect the access to the default tenant. Let's fill in the tenant name field, the username, which is admin, and the password, which is the default one. Now it's time to change it. From now on, we can only log in to this tenant using the updated password. We are now logged in. Next, we'll add a license file to this account. To do that, open the user menu and select License. We can notice that the current status is unlicensed. Click the Upload button, select the license file, and open it. The information was successfully updated. We can see the last 6 digits of the license key, which is uniquely assigned to this tenant. Next to it, we can view the expiry date. The license availability for each type of robot is displayed as well. So, up until this point, the process of tenant licensing seems pretty similar to that of host licensing. However, there is a significant difference between the two. As previously shown, host licensing allows you to redistribute your robots between tenants easily whenever the need arises. In the case of tenant licensing, however, if this change will be needed at a future moment, it will be necessary to contact our support team in order to have the robots reassigned on another license key. Now that we've licensed this tenant individually, let's log out and switch to the Orchestrator instance of the system administrator or the host admin. We'll be able to view the tenant that we have just licensed. And here it is. The name of the tenant, default, is followed by the license key. And that concludes the tenant licensing procedure. In the next lesson of our training, we'll see how a robot is licensed in Orchestrator. Hello, and welcome back to the UiPath licensing demo. In this video, we'll look at how a standard robot can acquire its license from Orchestrator. Let's begin. We have already logged in to this Orchestrator tenant, which is licensed. There are two steps in licensing a UiPath robot: defining it in Orchestrator and then connecting it to that Orchestrator. For the first step, let's navigate to the Robots tab and click the plus button to add a new one. There are two robot types, standard and floating. In this demo, we'll see how a standard robot is provisioned, so this is the option that we'll select. We must fill in all the fields here. Firstly, we have to enter the machine name. If that piece of information is unknown, we can open the UiPath robot application to find it out. Next, click the robot icon in System Tray. Open the settings, and the machine name is right there in the first field. We can simply copy and paste it. Let's give our robot a name that enables us to easily identify it later on. Next, we have to provide the domain and username. To find out what they are, we can open Control Panel, navigate to System and Security, and then select System. The domain is shown right here. As for the username, we can see it if we open command prompts and type "Who am I?" And there we go. Next, the password used to log in to this machine is required. We have reached the robot type selection, and these are all of our options. We'll leave the current selection, namely development, and click on the Create button. Okay, now the robot is created, but it has not been connected to Orchestrator yet, so let's do that. Open the robot settings window once again. First, we have to enter the Orchestrator URL in the corresponding field. Second, we need the machine key, which can be found in the Machines tab. Click the View button and then copy the key. Proceed by pasting it in the robot settings window. Everything is set, so let's click Connect. The status was updated to connected and licensed. We've just used a development license, which, as you may remember, is necessary to license UiPath Studio. So, let's go ahead and open Studio to see what happened. If we open the Help tab, we can see that the license provider is Orchestrator, and the device ID is also displayed. If we want to start developing a new process, we can do that without a problem, as the studio has acquired its license. And that covers the licensing steps for a standard robot. In the next video, we'll look at how floating robots are licensed. Hello, and welcome to the UiPath Floating Robot Licensing Demo. In the previous video, we saw that when we provision a standard robot, we need to define the exact machine on which the robot runs, as well as with the username. However, in the case of persistent or non-persistent virtual desktop infrastructures, it's difficult, if not impossible, to know all the machines that need to be defined beforehand. The same applies to a hot seat scenario. When using standard robots, we need to define all the possible machine username combinations, which can be a very cumbersome process. This is when the usage of floating robots is needed. Instead of defining all the particular machines, we can simply define a machine template. Let's go to the Machines tab and click the Add button. Now there are two options, Standard Machine and Machine Template, which is the one that we will select. Let's name this template and we can click Provision. Now that the machine template has been added to the list, a machine key was generated. To see it, click the Edit button, and here it is. We'll make use of it later to allow our floating robots to work on any machine without the need of specifically provisioning it in Orchestrator. Let's move on to the next step, which consists of provisioning our floating robot. We'll click the Add button, and we can notice that the machine field is missing, as opposed to standard robots, which require us to define a specific machine, the one on which they execute processes. But let's go back to our floating robot. Now we'll type a name and the Windows credentials. And then we need to choose the robot type. The floating option is available only for the development and attended robots. In our case, let's pick the attended one. We can click Create Now. At the moment, the robot status is disconnected. Now it's time to establish the connection between the robot and Orchestrator. To do that, click the UI icon in the system tray and open the Robot Settings section. We need to fill in the Orchestrator URL, and here is where we need the key of the machine template. By doing so, we basically add this machine in particular as part of the same machine pool pertaining to the defined machine template. So, let's go back to the Machines page in Orchestrator to copy the machine key, and then we'll paste it in the corresponding field in the Robot Settings window. We also need the Orchestrator URL. And we can click on Connect. We can now see that the robot is connected and licensed. Let's go back to the robots to see if the disconnected status has changed. It is now available. So, we've been through the process of provisioning a floating robot in Orchestrator. In our next lesson, we'll look at how licenses are managed through Orchestrator. Hello, and welcome back to the UiPath licensing demo. In this video, we'll see how named user licenses are managed. Let's begin. Let's start by adding a new standard robot. We've already seen how to do that in the previous video. Same as before, we'll fill in the required information. Let's add the machine, the robot name, username, password, and let's choose the robot type. As you may recall, named user licenses are available for development and attended robots. Let's choose the type Development for this demo. In the case of named user licenses, a license is consumed every time we define a robot in Orchestrator for a distinct user. If we open the License tab in Orchestrator, we can notice that one development named user license has been used after defining the robot, even though the robot is not yet connected to Orchestrator. We can define multiple robots on distinct machines for the same user, allowing them to access the software from any of them successively while consuming only one license. Now let's try using the same username but a different machine name. All the other pieces of information are the same, so we can type them in and click Create. Now, two robots share a single username. If we navigate to the License tab, we can see that the license usage has not changed, and this is because the username is the same. So, named user license consumption depends on the number of distinct usernames provisioned. If I proceed to define a robot for another username, a second named user license will be consumed. And therefore, the number of named user licenses purchased dictates the number of distinct usernames that you can provision in Orchestrator, which basically is the number of distinct users with granted access to the software. And that was all for named user license management. In our next video, we'll see how concurrent user licenses are managed. Hello, and welcome to a new UiPath demo. In this video, we're going to see how concurrent user licenses are managed in Orchestrator. Please remember that this license type is only applicable to UiPath Studio and attended robots. In contrast with the named user licenses, here we can add as many robots as we want, as licenses are consumed when the robot connection to Orchestrator is established, and not when the users are defined. Let's begin our demo by provisioning a standard attended robot. Fill in the machine field, type the name of the robot, the domain and username of this machine, the password, and finally, the type of robot. Alright, we can now click Create. Now we will provide another one, and we'll use the name of the current machine. Give a name to the robot, fill in the domain and username again, and the password. This one is an attended robot too. Now we'll provision yet another robot. Let's use a different machine, and we'll fill in the rest of the details. This one is attended as well. Okay, we have now provisioned 3 attended robots, none of which is connected to Orchestrator at the moment. If we go to the License tab, we can see that no license is consumed. To proceed, we'll connect our second robot to Orchestrator and check the license consumption afterwards. We need the machine name, so let's open the Machines tab to copy that piece of information. We'll paste it in the corresponding field within the Robot Settings window. And we also have to enter the Orchestrator URL. Okay, we're all set now. Let's see if there is any change in the License tab. 1 connection out of 3 available ones was established. And that means that in the case of concurrent user licenses, we can define as many robots as we want, but the license consumption depends on whether robots are connected to Orchestrator or not. When we open the UiPath robot window in System Tray, we can see the connected licensed status. If we disconnect the robot, the license page is updated and the license is released. Okay, well that concludes our concurrent user license management demo. In the next video, we'll look at how concurrent runtime licenses are managed. Hello and welcome. In this video, we're going to see how concurrent runtime licenses can be managed through Orchestrator. This license type is dedicated to unattended robots, so let's start off by creating one. We'll add a standard machine, as the floating option is not yet available for unattended robots. Select the machine that we've just created, choose a name for this robot, type the domain and username, then the password, and set the robot type to unattended. Now, if the operating system of the machine that we've just provisioned is a Windows 7 or 10, the behavior of the concurrent runtime license is very similar to the one of concurrent user licenses. We can install unattended robots on as many workstations as we want and provision them in Orchestrator. Licenses are only consumed when a machine is connected. On the license page, we can see that no unattended license is being consumed, as we haven't connected the robot to the Orchestrator yet. So, why was a different concept needed? Well, this license type is designated for unattended robots. Since they don't require human interaction, they are often deployed on Windows servers in high-density environments. That allows for the full utilization of each machine at your disposal by registering a robot on each of the users and having them run simultaneously. Moreover, when we define the machines that host our unattended robots in Orchestrator, we should also set the total number of concurrent runtimes, which indicates how many robot licenses need to be assigned to that particular machine when it connects to the Orchestrator with its robot squad. Let's picture that this machine is a Windows server on which 3 robots should be working simultaneously. To accomplish that, we need to set the number of runtimes for this machine accordingly. This way, when the machine connects to the Orchestrator, it acquires 3 licenses, 1 for each robot. Let's assign 3 out of 5 available runtimes. Now we'll open the robot settings window on this machine to establish the connection. The Orchestrator URL is right here. We can click Connect Now. Let's check the license page again. As you can see, the consumption is of 60% with 3 licenses assigned to this machine. As soon as we click Disconnect in the Robot Settings window, all the runtimes become available again. We can also disconnect the machine from Orchestrator. So let's connect again. On the license page, we can select See More and then click this toggle button to disable the machine. If we go back to the license page, we can notice that all the runtimes are now available again. And that concludes our demos on license management.